The Philadelphia Phillies are still reeling following the news of Zack Wheeler going down with a blood clot issue, but boy has there been some response from this Phillies team, with the starting pitching leading the way with Cristopher, Sanchez, and Ranger Suarez right at the top of the conversation. We do have a new update regarding Wheeler's status, as he did undergo a surgery to address the issue and saw these guys step up and deliver in the way that every Phillies fan should hope in the meantime. I do want to dive into a little bit of each of it in this video here and talk about the starting pitching picture for this Phillies team as we begin to move forward into this final playoff push. Now, to dive right into things here, I do want to start off with the latest news regarding Zack Wheeler, which is that Phillies starting pitcher Zack Wheeler underwent a successful thrombolysis procedure to remove a blood clot in his right upper extremity, the team announced. The recovery timeline is yet to be determined. And with this, I will note the Phillies are going to continue to push off saying it and are going to try their best to not make this a firm commitment here. But I think everything is pointing to we've seen the end of Zack Wheeler's season. And that is incredibly frustrating for a guy who's been the certified ace of this Phillies team, a guy that is a horse when they are a dying breed in the MLB. And just to highlight what he's done from a statistical perspective, that across 24 games, a .667 win-loss percentage there, has thrown 149.2 innings, allowed just 19 home runs and 107 hits, while striking out 195 across this portion of time. That comes out to a 2.71 ERA and a .935 whip there, that he leads all of baseball in strikeouts, leads the entire National League in whip. There is no just replacing that guy. But what I'm encouraged by is it does feel like the others are starting to step up. And I do think this was well put by Bill Calarulo here, who tweets out, Ranger Suarez showed up in a big boy last night. Cristopher Sanchez did tonight. The lineup has shown up a few days in a row. The bullpen has to pull their weight. Frustrating outing for Kirkring. And I will note, I'm not up in arms about the Kirkring outing. Is it maddening that Cristopher Sanchez pitched as well as he did? And to highlight exactly what that was on tonight's standpoint for Sanchez, that he did go 6.1 innings, allowed 6 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, and 12 strikeouts. He looked like an absolute ace there. And to throw a little more evidence on this, that Cristopher Sanchez threw 26 of his 27 first pitch strikes tonight. That is 96%, the best by any Phillies pitcher since at least 2000, and the second best by any pitcher in baseball over the last 25 years. Rob Thomson says he doesn't remember seeing that. Cristopher Sanchez can be the ace if he wants to be. And every sign is pointing to he's going to seize this opportunity here. It has now been enough of a sample size to believe that Cristopher Sanchez is just this guy. That I've been incredibly encouraged that since he's gotten his opportunity with the Phillies here, the way that he's consistently leveled his game up on a year-by-year basis, and to highlight what he's put to the table just this season with Sanchez here, that he's thrown 150.2 innings across 24 games, a .733 win-loss percentage there, has given up 10 home runs and 128 hits while striking out 157 across this stretch there. That comes out to a 2.45 ERA and a 1.088 whip there. He's still just 28 years old. This guy's still finding out exactly who he is as a pitcher, and I cannot wait to see the rest of those discoveries here. But Cristopher Sanchez is not doing it alone, as obviously he cannot be out on the mound on an every game basis. And Ranger Suarez, what he did last night, may be even more encouraging to me. And what that was exactly, to pull up the statistics here, that Ranger went 6.2 innings, allowed 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 10 strikeouts, and 102 pitches there. Jordan Romano did his best to try and blow this one, and I did love the little Ranger reaction in the dugout there after that home run. That 1 earned run really doesn't deserve to be on him, and if I'm going to be honest, when watching that game live, I did not think he should have even gone out there to start the 7th inning, that this is a situation where I would really prioritize resting the innings for these guys. When you get a chance to get a guy out of the game, which at that time it was 7-0, I would take that if I'm Rob Thomson, but nonetheless, Ranger did his job, man. And perhaps more encouraging than just that raw stat line here was the uptick in velocity from Ranger Suarez. Just looking at last night's performance, that his sinker up 0.2 miles per hour, his cutter up 1.6 miles per hour, his curveball up 0.8 miles per hour, his slider 1.1, the 4-seam fastball 0.1 there. I get that these are small margins here, but when you think about the status of this Phillies team, the state of this Phillies team, they need Ranger Suarez to look like Ranger Suarez. And while I think some of the reactions or frustrations for a couple recent starts are overblown, there is some noteworthy trends about the dip in velocity extending 3 seasons to this point. We've seen Ranger run into some dead arm situations. What I will always admire about Ranger Suarez is there is a gutsiness to the way that he pitches that I think is pretty rare in pitchers across all of Major League Baseball, that even just look at last year, what happened, that he was one of the best pitchers in baseball for the first half of the season. Then it was very clear he hit that dead arm period where he did not have the proper control. The velocity dipped and really looked concerning for the entire second half of the year. Then we get to playoff time, and Ranger Suarez just did his job, man. He just was the guy that the Phillies needed him to be, and obviously this did not translate to deep postseason success, but that has fallen the bats more than anything in the pitching staff, and I will remember Ranger Suarez fondly for delivering in that opportunity. I believe he can be that guy for this season perspective once again. And to highlight what he's done for the year overall, it is not a far leap to get there. That so far this season, he's pitched in 19 games. The 29-year-old has thrown 119 innings. He's allowed 10 home runs and 110 hits across this stretch here, while tallying 111 strikeouts, which comes out to a 3.25 ERA and a 1.168 whip there. Ranger Suarez is going to be our Phillies Game 2 starter unless anything absurd happens with Zack Wheeler. Now, with the Wheeler standpoint, I think the Phillies are going about this with the right approach overall, that I do think that they've been very front-facing in the concept of this is a human being issue, that this guy has a real life outside of baseball, has a family, has a wife, all these conversations, that this could be something that could have gone far worse if they did not catch it here. And I do think that there is this, I guess, bleak sense of optimism that maybe he could come back. I do think it's incredibly unlikely, and again, I do think it is right to prioritize in this state of the game that they have to focus on what is the repercussions of forcing him back, and frankly, is he going to be effective if you even try and do that? That I think you have to play the long game with Zack Wheeler, and it's unfortunate that this is not an issue which you can just ask a guy to pitch through. This is not a pulled hamstring or a sore shoulder here. This is a blood clot. This is a medical issue beyond just a sports industry here, or sports injury here, and I think everyone is cognizant of that. So you have to find a way to continue plodding on. This is about this team setting a bit of an identity beyond just Zack Wheeler. That starting pitching has been a strength of this roster. While I still would consider that somewhat of a strength, it certainly took a huge dip with Zack Wheeler, your best pitcher, your ace, your foundational piece, no longer being a part of this puzzle here. But if the offense can deliver, and it certainly has in recent games, this team can still go pretty far. We will see what ultimately happens with Wheeler, but I could not be more thrilled with the response that I've seen from this entire Phillies team and from the pitching staff specifically. For Cristopher Sanchez and Ranger Suarez stepping up and looking like guys that can be game 1 and 2 starters from a playoff perspective, especially following Aaron Nola not looking like that guy whatsoever upon his return. And for the Nola takes, I understand it did not look great. He got hit around in that third inning, but he looked pretty fine in the first and second, and I need a little bit more of a sample size for this guy in his return to majors before I'm ready to count him out. There has been a long stretch of time where Aaron Nola has been a successful pitcher for this Phillies team. It has not been the case this year, even before the injury, that he was rough. We have to note that, but that's still a guy that I'm not ready to count out entirely here. They need him to be in the mix, to be a part of this rotation, to be a guy that they can count on from a playoff perspective, and it is to be determined if that will be the case. But if Ranger Suarez and Cristopher Sanchez can be those guys, then there is not as much pressure on Aaron Nola directly here. So we will see ultimately what goes down from here, but I'm feeling encouraged by this Phillies team as a whole, by the starting pitching outside of Wheeler, who continues to deal with his medical issue and is home recovering. Everything seems positive in that regard. It is great that he's got the surgery. It is great that they identified that. It's just a tough break on the timing of everything for this Phillies team in particular. And by the way, before I signed off here, could not help but acknowledge Johan Duran, man. It is awesome. It is just straight up awesome to have a closer that you know you get to the 9th inning and it's game over. Him gassing Cal Riley with 3 straight fastballs there, the home run leader in the MLB, the guy who very well could be the MVP of this entire league, just straight up gas, throw it by him, and he's not touching this. I think there is a legitimate case that Johan Duran directly is the best pitcher in all of baseball. We'll see if we're ready to have that conversation when the postseason gets here, but I do want to bookmark that conversation for a future day. But we'll see what ultimately happens from here, but I'm encouraged by this Philly starting pitching and what we've seen in recent days. Let me know if you guys are with me in the comments here, if you have the same thought process, but I feel pretty excited about the way that both Sanchez and Ranger have gone about their business the past 2 days, and I do think it is noteworthy to connect it to exactly what has gone down with Zack Wheeler. So drop those thoughts below. Appreciate each and one of you guys for tuning in as always. If you have not already, make sure you're smashing the subscribe button on the channel, dropping a like on this video here. I'll be back. Talk with you next time. Peace.